Last summer, a few months after I began quarantining from a global pandemic, I started writing a short film. Maybe short film / video essay hybrid would be a more perfect term, since it was both narrative exploration and analysis of a previously established work. In my rough draft, the protagonist has been watching Haruhi Suzumiya for the first time, with all of the free time from the pandemic, watching one new episode each day, and has just begun the Endless 8 arc. After the initial confusion about whether he's watching the first episode again, and then excitement at the time loop structure, he slowly realizes that he too is basically in a time loop, doing the same things day in and day out, worrying more and more about the unassailable causation for his current situation, and slowly but surely becoming a passive observer of his own life, like Yuki, stuck in a rut that worsens with every passing day. But Haruhi never wound up being the story I analyzed for my project, because as I was making revisions to my script, I had an itch that wouldn't go away. Haruhi wasn't the proper vehicle that the story should be told through. Sure, it got at the heart of time loops, but it was missing the feeling of being stuck in one location. Additionally, Yuki is far from the focus character, which in my opinion is a strength of Endless 8, but didn't make it a great pick for this. And 8 days of a series is not even remotely comparable to the months of quarantine that I'd been sitting through at that point. Being trapped physically as well as temporally was so much of the narrative side of the project, something Endless 8 lacks. So I wound up changing it out for Groundhog Day, where Phil is unable to leave Puxatani, and instead of an episode a day, a broken DVD that skips back to the beginning before the film can end. As I was shooting the project, I decided that every new day would start with the main character waking up in point of view, staring at a ceiling, before turning over on their side and looking at their phone, because it spoke to my experience of every single day waking up and staring at the same ceiling, about to go through all of the same motions and almost never leaving that small room. It genuinely got so depressing that I started projecting movies onto it before I went to sleep as to disassociate the ceiling from the negative emotions that I was slowly building towards it. And it is in this position that we're in right now, as you and I stare at the ceiling, that I watched all 11 episodes of the Tatami Galaxy in February of this year. And as I watched the 10th episode, I couldn't help but feel like I had made my short film too early. That the ideal vehicle for my project was not Groundhog Day, nor was it Haruhi, but Tatami. Because fundamentally, it gets at the rut, the physical and emotional isolation, and that feeling of being stuck that slowly grows like a creeping shadow over what at first felt like a grand and necessary reprieve. It is the story that most speaks to my year plus of quarantine. The Tatami Galaxy was written in 2004 and adapted in 2010. It is not a story about life in a global pandemic. In fact, on the surface, it's basically the opposite. A normal existence following Watashi, our unnamed male lead, as he goes through his first 2 years of university, joining the tennis club, meeting a girl, making a friend, getting into trouble, the works. The show isn't coy about its themes. It's a story about loneliness and uncertainty that your chosen path in life is the best one, how we can self-sabotage a good thing by being completely unrealistic, letting the perfect be the enemy of the good, how self-awareness is critical, and yet how being overly self-aware can cause paralysis of one's ability to pursue their desires. And that's all within the first episode. At the end of the episode, the clock rewinds, and at the start of the second episode, Watashi and his buddy Ozu are now in the movie club instead of the tennis club, getting into more shenanigans as, yet again, our male lead makes decisions that ultimately end in his dissatisfaction with his life to this point, and then again, and then again. It would seem, at first blush, that this is a time loop storyline, one where each return to the past opens with the lead choosing a new club without knowledge of the previous timelines, for us to see if another club and set of circumstances would arrive at the rose-colored life he claims to desire. Shocking no one, I really enjoy that format. The cast stays pretty tiny while we get to see vastly different sides of them. Mysteries pop up in one timeline that get necessary context in others, and there's a kind of frantic energy to the direction that matches the absurd situations to constantly keep you on your toes. It is a really fun show to watch, even as our main character continuously finds himself dissatisfied with his circumstances by the end of each episode. After 9 episodes of loops, our protagonist comes to the conclusion that if he cannot find happiness, if he will never achieve a rose-colored life, then it is better to stay in his room. And thus, in the following loop, this version of Watashi forgoes a club, states that a rose-colored life is nothing but a dream, and spends his entire 2 years in a 4.5 tatami room, leaving only when necessary. and after an extensive exploration of every quadrant of his room, using the framing device of Jules Verne's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, which is truly one of the most inspired decisions I've ever seen on a screen, Watashi becomes unable to leave his room at all. The entire outside world has turned into copies of this 4.5 tatami room. Exiting through the door, the window, or the ceiling results in his entrance to the same 4.5 tatami pattern. He has, at first glance, become trapped in his room by circumstances outside of his control. Sound familiar? And while at first he panics, it doesn't take long before Watashi begins to think about the infinite possibilities. Convincing himself that he can finally read all the books on his shelf, turn some of the rooms into a bowling alley. Indeed, he can do anything within the bounds of his imagination. And that idea really, truly spoke to me. Again, this show is not about living in quarantine while some deadly pandemic rages outside, but suddenly here's a character who's now in the same position I was in. At the start of being locked into one small space, I thought to myself, hey, this isn't necessarily a bad thing. A bit of time away from everything will be nice. I had books I wanted to read, movies I wanted to watch, videos I wanted to write, a screenplay I'd been putting off for months. I'd always liked my room, my space. Here's a chance to hunker down and reset. I, just like our main character, had kind of dreamt about a moment where I could just focus without outside distractions. But those are just dreams, and even as Watashi revels in his limitless imagination and the possibilities, he sheds a tear. Because in none of those possibilities does he have anyone with him. He is painfully alone. Part of the beauty of withdrawing from the world is that he could always leave his 4.5 tatami room and venture outside. On the day that he decided he was sick of that room and his isolation, he could get up and leave. It was an active decision on his part to pull away. Without that possibility, that lack of agency, this is hell. The animation incorporates live action elements of a room at this point. Prior to his inability to leave, the room was drawn as well. Our animated character is now interacting over photos of a real three-dimensional space, bottles moving in stop motion. It is simultaneously the farthest from reality that the show has gone, with the impossible situation laid out in front of him, and yet it is the closest to our world. These photos were taken in a real space. Someone found a room and took video in it. That blending of reality and fiction helps to place the audience in the room. In this situation, you can see the texture of the mats. Watch water boil one-to-one with how you experience it. It is both clearly unreal and yet all too real. It is discordant. Life here is twisted. Everything is gray. It's frankly depressing to look at, especially compared to how vibrant the color palette had been in previous episodes. And once Watashi realizes how lonely he is, all of the music leaves, sticking us alone with his monologue. Even as we watch and listen to one person try and keep themselves sane, stuck eating the same two meals over and over again, we are led to the conclusion that one can only stimulate the mind without outside influence for so long. There's only so much one can do when all by themselves. That this is a repetitive hell, an overwhelming rut that slowly scrapes away anything positive about the initial situation. And that, as I said in my explanation about my short film, felt so fucking raw. I kind of couldn't believe it because I've never felt lonely in quarantine. I have amazing friends and a welcoming Discord, along with a low need for social interaction to start with, but even so, Tatami had nailed my experience. If I'm trapped in one place, it kind of doesn't matter how much I want to accomplish, how much imagination I have. Eventually, my life will simplify into the bare minimum. Wake up, look at my phone, stare at my computer the entire day for work and for fun, eat a meal, shower, sleep. I felt like I was in a time loop, doing the same thing day in and day out, my routine driving patterns in my floor, and anything extraneous to it was slowly but surely cut out. That's why I had felt the need to make that short film. I needed something to break me out of the funk, and it worked, but it did not take long before I was right back staring at that ceiling. It felt like my high hopes for what I wanted to accomplish in quarantine were dashed on the rocks of repetition. I have no one to blame for that but myself, to be clear. I let myself fall into the path of least resistance. But without external forces like new experiences, it was far easier to simplify. I'd like to think that the rut also drove Watashi a little bit stir-crazy. And, as he says, the smell of the excretions in the next room got him moving, too. I'm serious, man. Sometimes you just need something to get you moving. And he sets out exploring the endless world of tatami rooms spread out before him. Over time, he realizes that they are the rooms of the alternate timelines we had seen before, from even the very first episode. And this, ultimately, is the catalyst for his character change, because even as all of those previous versions saw their lives as short of what they had imagined, this version sees them not as failures to achieve a rose-colored life, the supposed perfect ideal university life, but as colorful, in their own way, with meaningful interactions and fun. At the very least, superior to the drab gray life that we see him in currently, left all alone with solitary delusions. The idea that all the rooms are alternate timelines also fulfills a nice plot element, where some of the remaining outstanding mysteries are put together. The ghostly face we saw in this episode was this version trying to get that version's attention, or all the money in the backpack that magically appears. Eventually, after traversing hundreds of rooms and getting to know the cast of characters that we had met in the previous episodes, putting together the pieces of their shared experiences, our main character realizes that being alone is not what he desired at all. Even if none of those timelines were perfect, there was happiness to be found in them, with the people who he had come to know, and that the only thing holding him back from happiness was himself.
ありもしないものばかり夢見て自分の足元さえ見てなかったのだ。
This idea is represented in the small stuffed character hanging from his light fixture, which is explicitly a callback to the fact that he has to return it to the girl he likes, who he also needs to keep his promises with. The opportunity had always been hanging right in front of him. He had just gotten so lost in the perfect that he hadn't stopped to recognize what he had. Grabbing onto that character, the opportunity, is what frees him from those rooms, and that is the core takeaway in Tatami. You should take opportunities that are presented to you. Even if they take you out of your comfort zone or they might make you a bit nervous, good. That's life. Sometimes you need to take a step back and appreciate what you have instead of what you don't. It helps you be aware of what you need versus what you want. And for our main character, he wanted a perfect rose-colored life, but he needed a non-monotone life with people who he cares about and who care about him in turn. After leaving the room, meeting the girl whose stuffed character that was, saving Ozu from his mistakes, and helping some of the people his other versions cared about, and that he is now invested in as well from reading about, he moves out of his 4.5 tatami apartment, begins dating the girl, and, in a reversal from the first episode, declares that he and Ozu are connected by the black thread of fate, and that by showing interest in Ozu's life and the people he cares about, our protagonist is showing his love. The Tatami Galaxy's ending encourages its audience to make the most of what they have, to not lose sight of good things simply because they are not perfect, to not wither away in regret over paths untaken, or, put most simply, that the joy of life isn't in waiting or worrying, but in doing and striving. It's about the people in our lives, if we're lucky enough to have them. It's a powerful ending, not just because it speaks to my experience in quarantine, but because it's so applicable. It works if you're feeling down on your luck, having a temporary moment of self-doubt, an unshakable sense that you're trapped, or, yes, you've been in a time loop year of quarantine. The solution might be to shift your perspective. It might be to grab hold of an opportunity that's been in front of you all along. Maybe it's both. For me, there was definitely a component of waiting, but I did grab onto a few opportunities while in quarantine, and I used the time to gain perspective. And now, well, I've got a shot in my arm. And by the time you're watching this video, I will have moved out of this room, almost one for one with our protagonist's decision at the end. I feel like I learned a lot about myself in these 5 walls. Figured out what I need to do in my life to be happy, but my year-plus long quarantine in this place is over, and I can't help but see that as anything but a good thing. I didn't get to this show until late into my experience. I actually had an entire other anime that really kept me sane when I felt like I was losing myself in here. But Tatami's themes are so ubiquitous to life in the modern era that it would have stuck with me regardless of when I watched it. I just happened to watch it in a moment where episode 10 and episode 11 felt intensely personal. The Tatami Galaxy is not a story about what it was like to live in quarantine during a global pandemic, but its ending is a reminder, to me at least, of the lessons that I'll need to bring with me as I walk out of my own 4.5 tatami room for the last time.